critical approach because Afghanistan still is in a transition period, still in a transition period. We are going to talk about these transitions first. But at the very beginning, I would like to ask for the geography or geopolitics. What is in Afghanistan, or what is in this territory that everybody is looking forward to see or to be in that place? So for many centuries, Afghanistan has been a natural corridor for conquerors and traders that move troops or goods from the west to east, between Middle East and India and other way around. Nowadays, Afghanistan is more than a corridor. It's a crossroad of routines in Asia. The political, economic, social, and military life of the Afghan state is conditioned by the Hindu Kush Mountains massif. These mountains part a great amount of territory and hinder communications between the various provinces. In addition, the harsh continental climate during winter favors the tribe's importance over the central government and frequently constrains the state action to the capital and its whereabouts. Traditionally, the terrain has helped the asymmetrical strategies, particularly the use of the guerrilla. The external borders aren't natural any type of control. That's why they are prone to illegal traffic of weapons, drugs, and also human beings. Afghanistan is positioned at the junction of several powers. Almost all are nuclear, aiming to be regional leaders such as China, Pakistan, India, Russia, and Iran. This is very important for Afghanistan, the neighborhood, affecting its internal politics. So when we look at the history of the Afghanistan, we can see these powers or these actors, influential actors in Afghanistan. The land that is now Afghanistan has a long history of domination by foreign conquerors, as mentioned before, and strife among internally warring factions. As the gateway between Asia and Europe, this land was conquered by certain powerful actors in the past. During the 19th century, Britain, for example, looking to protect its Indian empire from Russia, attempted to annex Afghanistan, resulting in a series of British-Afghan wars between the 1838 and 42, between 1878 to 80, and also 1990. The British, beleaguered in the wake of the World War I, are defeated in the Third British-Afghan War, and Afghanistan becomes an independent nation. Just for your information, I would like to say that Afghanistan had been an independent state 4 years before Turkish independence in 1923. So this concern that Afghanistan has fallen behind the rest of the world, Amir Amanullah Khan begins a rigorous campaign of socio-economic reform. Amanullah declared Afghanistan a monarchy and proclaimed himself the king. He launched a series of modernization processes. Critics, frustrated by Amanullah policies, take up arms in 1928, and by 1929, the king abdicated and left the country. And there started turmoil inside the country. In 1979, communist measures in Afghanistan provoked a Muslim jihad and the murder of more than 100 Russians, and Soviet troops invaded Afghanistan to suppress anti-communist anarchy. In 1982, the Saudi fundamentalist Osama bin Laden, as you may know, joined the Mujahideen in their fight against the Soviet occupiers of Afghanistan. In 1989, Soviet Union completed withdrawal of its troops from this specific country. By September 1996, the Taliban had captured Kabul, killed the country's president Najibullah, and established the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. This is the first Taliban rule. In 2001, immediately after 9/11, the United States launched military action against Taliban by the help of the NATO afterwards, and Al-Qaeda. The US-led invasion of Afghanistan swept the Taliban from power and their protection of Al-Qaeda. So you may see on the screen, this is a timeline of the Afghanistan's short history I would like to tell. Then what? Let's talk about this issue. NATO-led operation. Now, there comes the ISAF period, NATO period of the Afghanistan. NATO allies went into Afghanistan after 9/11 terrorist attacks. on the United States to ensure that the country does not again become a safe haven for international terrorists. Over the last 2 decades, there have been no terrorist attacks on Allied soil from Afghanistan. This is the success of this kind of international operations. And you might ask what happened with the Afghanistan's invasion, and is there any profitable outcome? Yes, there is a very profitable outcome, that there weren't any specific threat originated from Afghanistan. From August 2003, NATO led the United Nations mandated International Security Assistance Force, ISAF is called, which aimed to create the conditions whereby the Afghan government could exercise its authority throughout the country and build the capacity of Afghan national security forces, including in the fight against international terrorism. Was completed in December 2014, when the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces assumed full responsibility for security across the country. So then afterwards, as you may know, the Resolute Support mission came, which was, I was part of this mission because I was there in 2016. The Resolute Support mission started in 2015, launched its mission, and basing on this 3 important steps: train, assist, and advise. It's called TAA mission. So NATO is also started to soften its impact all around the country. We started to train the Afghan forces, but Taliban was still there. Then I'm going to talk about this later. But first, let's look for the NATO's missions. You may see on the screen, I guess there is a 5 commandership. There was a 5 commandership in Afghanistan. And on the up north, the Mazar-e-Sharif region, the TAC North, Train, Assist, and Advised North Command, commanded by the German forces. On the west, TAC West, commanded by the Italians. South and the east, TAC East and TAC South, was commanded by the US forces. And TAC capital is under the command of the Turkish military. And everybody familiar with this information, what will happen in the Afghanistan Kabul airport? This airport was commanded by the Turkish forces, and what will happen next? We are going to talk on this issue later, I guess. So there was also another military forces, important forces, NDSF, which we call Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. And NDSF was consisting of 350,000 military personnel. It's very, now it's equal to Turkish military. You know, there's 80 million, 85 million people living in Turkey, and we have a 350,000 military personnel, of course, with the technological device and also some other kind of weaponry systems we have, but it's not so minor. Maybe this doubling the at least maybe 150,000 people, let's say, is there fighters in Taliban, but this 350,000 fighters are very important, and also it has also Afghan National Army, also Afghan National Police, Afghan Special Forces, and Afghan Air Forces. There was 5 aircrafts, assault aircrafts when I was there. So Afghanistan has its own operational national defense and security forces with the ability to conduct counterterrorism and security operations countrywide. So the NATO troops started with the huge numbers and decreased to or downsized to the 9,000 or 12,000 military personnel. So the United States was taking lead as also, and the Germans, Britons, and Italians, and Turkey was among the other troop contributing nations in Afghanistan. However, this downsizing issue is maybe paving the way for the Taliban's maybe occupation inside the Afghanistan. So Taliban issue is on one side, the financial issues on the other side, because the Afghanistan in the state building needs financial support, and this support had been provided by the donor countries, and at the very beginning, the United States. in 2016, there was $5 billion yearly basis for the support of the Afghan government. But this $4 billion had been supported or funded by the US government. $1 billion had been supported by other countries, donor countries, including Turkey. But this $4 billion is very important. And it was we were carefully spending these amounts because we were advisors, and the Afghan agencies had been corruption and the other issues had been very effective in these regions. That's why we were very careful in these spendings of these financial amounts. So at most, and before 2000, there were no money, we can say, financially in the government. But after that, after 2001, there's a flow inside the country, Afghanistan government, and at most it's $7 billion. It's very important to Afghanistan. And now, then it decreased a little bit, but still there were some financial support that you can run the state or agencies or doing other businesses with this amount of financial support. So I'm skipping these issues. A lot of countries helped Afghanistan government, but Turkey also supported the Afghanistan army and also Afghanistan police forces, because especially on the female side. In Antalya, there were also there were camps trained by Turkish officers, and then they came back to Afghanistan and they took part in the Afghanistan military forces. It's very important because in the female and Afghanistan, these two terms are now very idiosyncratic, but when you look from the past, you can very optimistic on that issue. Also, Afghanistan police forces also, it's not a one-time issue. So 6th term, for example, female Afghan police training program, it was very fascinating on these days. So Taliban problem, there was any problem, or there weren't any Taliban problem, and it came to the point in 2021? My answer is no. In 2001, the red parts of the region had been controlled by the Taliban. Still, in 2021, the red parts are still controlled by the Taliban forces. And what happened between these two during these 20 years? In 2015 and 16, 50 or 60% or 50 or 70% of the region, especially outside of the city centers, if you go away from 50 kilometers from the city center, there is no control of the government. There is also the control of the Taliban stars on that part of the territory. So the central authority has no power beyond the city centers, or also police forces. Otherwise, the Taliban did not pop up immediately. This is the control of the Taliban, and there was a fluency in controlling the territories. So a lot of people died or killed or injured in Afghanistan. This is a sad part of the chart. We can say still today, the people had been killed by this uncontrolled or undisciplined Taliban forces. But this is the reality of Afghanistan's problematic issue. Why failure? What happened in this failure? For example, nation building. This is called nation building. Is not a military strategy, and the top-down approach from the like a hierarchical governmental approach to state building, and sometimes it doesn't work. It works sometimes in the history. So Ottoman Empire, for example, top-down approach had worked. In Qing dynasty in the China, ancient China, it did work, but in Afghanistan, for example, or in Vietnam, it did not work. Sometimes it doesn't work. Says most states have been constructed not by force, but by compromise and cooperation. Heterogeneous society, also Afghanistan had been consisting of different tribal, ethnic, or other communities. The successful centralization of power under state institutions more commonly involves the assent and cooperation of the people subject to it. And some other issues, foreign aid to insurgents. Pakistan is taking the lead, for example. Pakistan is supporting this Taliban militia, then Taliban still exists and also can find the way to affect internal business of the Afghanistan. Otherwise, it not work. Corruption is also a common issue in Afghanistan. As I mentioned, ethnic breakdown. You see, the Pashtun minorities is 42%, for example. It may be different, but approximate numbers are these. Tajiks also, Hazaras, Uzbeks, others, for example, Nuristanis, Pashais, Belujis, Turkmens, and a lot of kind of heterogeneous ethnic breakdown is affecting the Afghanistan's unique state authority. It's really difficult to form one unique state under these circumstances. So what went wrong is another question, is a security failure. First, they could not provide the security all around the country. The sources of the threats are not only limited to the Taliban, but also consist of some other extremist Islamic groups. Taliban is not the sole and only power or actor inside the country. The Haqqani network, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, ISIL, Lashkar-e-Tayyiba, and Tahrik-i-Taliban are some of them, but there are more than these terrorist organizations, let me call terrorists. A lot of terrorist organizations are in Afghanistan still. Taliban was holding power in most of the country and was particularly strong in Kunduz, Helmand, Nangarhar, and Uruzgan regions. It was controlling 50 to 70% of the territory, especially in the rural parts of the country. So, NDSF was not successful enough in the fight with the Taliban fighters. Most of the time, they were surrendered to the Taliban forces. So there are some administrational failure. It's hard to govern a state in a fiercely independent, well-armed society with a long tradition of blood feuds and a recent history of civil war. And people turned to non-state actors precisely when they thought state institutions were ineffective and foreign to them. Really, it's difficult to manage these kind of communities. The result is an immense human tragedy. Even if the Taliban do not revert their worst practices, Afghan men and especially women will pay a high price for America's and the West's failures in the years and decades ahead. Afghanistan was a failed state. Still, it's a failed state and going to be the same in the near future. That's my estimation. And I would like to thank you for listening me.